What's up, and welcome back to the Kinda Funny screencast. Of course, I'm Tim Geddes, and I'm joined by It's Christmas in March, Joey Noel.
Hello, good morning. Happy Tuesday.
Gotta love a new month, a whole new Joe.
It's true. My new
You're not
butterfly for the month.
the butterfly, exactly, coming out of the
I'm
cocoon. You'll love to see it.
exactly.
And rounding out this crew, it is the sad boy himself, one of the biggest Batman fans I know, Barrett Courtney.
I'm Vincent.
Oh, I thought you had to say it's review season, because it is over here
It is
on the movie
it's
side.
season on all fronts. It's crazy, Tim.
Exactly. So much cool stuff coming out, including our review of Euphoria Season 2 that you can check out. We also reviewed a bunch of other shows we've been watching last week. It was me, Joey, Kevin, and Matt Rohrbeck hanging out a little bit, talking about Pam and Tommy, Murderville, After Party, a whole bunch of other cool stuff. So you can check that out over there. And right now, you're watching the Batman screencast review. This is going to be spoiler-free in the way that reviews are vague, and we're not trying to spoil any actual moments for you and all that stuff, so you don't need to worry there. We are going to be doing a full Batman in review in the Batman in Review franchise that we're doing later this week. That will include me, Nick, Kevin, Andy, and Greg doing all that stuff. That'll be full spoilers. That'll be full everything. But we all saw the movie, so I was like, you know what? We might as well get our thoughts out here with some people that aren't going to be on that a little bit early, just to get everybody an idea of where we land on Matt Reeves, the Batman. And now that we've been doing our new review scale thing and having a lead reviewer, I was like, I think it'd be pretty cool to have Barrett be the lead reviewer for the Batman because of his journey that he had recently, rewatching every single Batman movie, including a ton of the animated ones. And of course, he's played the games a million times. So I think that there's a good kind of frame of reference there. But before we get into all that, of course, this is the Kinda Funny screencast where each and every week we come together to talk about the latest in movies, TV, and trailers. You can get it on youtube.com/kindafunny or roosterteeth.com. You can also get it as a podcast by searching your favorite podcast service for Kinda Funny screencast, and we'll be right there for you. If you wanted to get the show ad-free and if you wanted to get it live as it's recorded, you got to go to patreon.com/kindafunny. Just like our Patreon producers, Molecule, Gordon McGuire, Fargo Brady, and Pranksy have done a new month, a new set of producers. Thank you so much for your support and helping make this show happen. Today, we're brought to you by Guild Wars, but I'll tell you about that later. I do want to get a little bit of housekeeping out of the way. We have a new Patreon Platinum tier print that is super dope. Joe, you want to talk about that?
Yes, this is done by KFBF Salesh. He's been super, super dope to work with. He's been put out like a bunch of fan art. There's like a notorious one that he did of Nick and Andy where I don't remember what holiday they were celebrating for KFF, but they were eating donuts without pants on. That was the one that I feel like Nick saw was like, we need to work with him more. So this is like a really fun, there we go, Avengers print with all of us. So
good.
So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. So you can check that out, patreon.com/kindafunny. And then, like I said, we have in review for the Batman later this week, which is very, very exciting. And then on Friday, another thing I wanted to promote is we are doing a race in Sifu over on twitch.tv/kindafunnygames. Me, Barrett, Bless, and Andy are just going to do a 4-way race. You're going to see all 4 of our gameplay feeds as we're just playing together, and who beats it first, we'll see, but it's going to be a fun time. Come hang out with us right after Games Daily on Friday to see that. Anyway, enough of all that stuff. Let's get right into it. I want to talk about what we thought about the Batman. Bear Courtney, what did you think, and where do you put it on our scale?
I had a really fun time last night. It was going into it. It was with all of the anticipation building up, as you had mentioned, like for the last month and a half to get myself hyped up. I've rewatched a bunch of Batman movies, been ranking them on my Letterboxd. There's like 20. I think there's like 24 movies that I've watched in the last month and a half. And I didn't really know where to go in with my expectations with all the hype going around it. Like Greg had asked me like right beforehand, right before the movie started, of like, where are we thinking? Like, where do we think this is gonna land? And I really didn't know. And walking out of it, I think it was great. I think it was such a fun mix of some of my favorite Batman comic stories. You know, Matt Reeves has mentioned his inspirations of The Long Halloween, most recently Batman Zero Year, which is like one of my favorite Batman comics. And I thought they did a really fun job of kind of mixing the tone of some of the older comic storylines, like The Long Halloween and a little bit of Dark Victory, mixed with like kind of more of like the themes and the ideas from some of the more modern Batman stories, like Batman Zero Year, and even some other things from the New 52 kind of storyline that I think they might have picked here and there to kind of embed into their story here. And even with that, I was impressed of like, it doesn't feel too much like any of the things that they took inspiration from. It does really feel like their own thing that they're trying to tell here. I think it is definitely the most intense Batman movie we've gotten. I don't think there isn't a moment in this movie that you couldn't cut the tension with a knife, you know? Like, I was just kind of just like clenching the entire time, not knowing where things were going next, feeling like, you know, maybe everybody is safe, maybe nobody is safe. I think the movie did a really good job at that. I loved the performances from a lot of the cast, and my only couple things is that, and the reason why I would put this as on the kind of funny scale as great but not amazing, is there were some things that had me kind of scratching my head of some choices, some of the emotional punches that they try to deliver that I don't think they deliver as well as like the kind of like dreadful punches that they deliver throughout the movie. And there were some moments definitely near the end where I was kind of questioning of like, am I interested where they could go with this universe? Yes, but I don't know if I'm excited to see if where they go with this universe. I don't know after this movie if this universe quite has the legs to, you know, have a sequel or two. I think it's yet to be seen, but overall, I had a really fun time last night. I do think it's the best Batman movie we've gotten in quite a long time. So I really enjoyed it.
I heard someone as we were leaving say it was the best Batman movie since the last one, and that made me laugh a lot. Joey Noel, what did you think about it? And now to catch you up, a little reminder of what the kind of funny scale is now. It's 1 to 5, 1 being terrible, 2 being bad, 3 being okay/good, 4 being great, and 5 being amazing.
Okay, that's gonna give me. I'll have to think about that one for a little bit. I am kind of with Barrett. I had a fun time, which is a weird thing to say about this movie because it's not necessarily a fun movie. It's I mean, we knew it was going to be dark to the degree that all Batman movies are dark, but this didn't have there wasn't a ton of fun, but I liked that it went in a different direction. I think all of the performances are really incredible. I was really sold on Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz I really liked. John Turturro, man, he's having a resurgence between this and Severance, and I am like here for it. It's fun to have him back, and he's not just like, I don't know, maybe it's just me. He's just not the guy
I didn't
from
know he was in
Transformers
Severance as well, but yeah, the last thing I thought of him in was Transformers, and I was like, that guy's gonna be in this playing playing
quite
a mob
the character
man?
arc.
Yeah. Colin Farrell, still one of those really incredible like makeup and costuming things where I stared at him forever and I'm like, I still can't see you in that at all.
Yeah.
But was really good. I thought a lot of the character interactions were great. I didn't love the storyline of it in the set, like in terms of like the A plot and the B plot. I think that's where things kind of got lost a little bit for me. Just in that, I think, I don't know, that's the harder part to not spoil.
Yeah.
But that was like kind of my least favorite part and kind of where they lost me in the movie. What I really appreciated about the movie is I liked this version of Bruce Wayne. In kind of like my past criticisms of Batman movies, it's like I don't like the balance they have between Batman and Bruce, and like kind of it feels like actors for those movies kind of did like one better than the other. I think the fact that they took Bruce in a totally different direction in terms of like the billionaire playboy trope that we see a lot. I think Robert Pattinson did his version of Bruce Wayne really well, and the motivations and for the reasons of why he is the way he is, I think make way more sense within Batman canon than I know it. than kind of what we've seen in the past. And then I loved the like detective feel of this. Like it reminded me a lot of like the minimal amount of the Batman Arkham games that we've played, where it's like, oh, you're like actively kind of involved in trying to figure things out. You're just not like a cool guy with gadgets. So I had a fun time. I would probably put it, I know we don't do half stars or whatever, but I'm somewhere between the it's better. It's definitely better because just in terms of quality of a movie than a 3. But the story I think drags it back a little bit for me. But I would probably put it at a solid 4.
Okay. So you're too great so far. I'm gonna round that out with a third 4 out of 5, giving it a great, which I do think can be read as unfortunate to a lot of people, myself included. I think we kind of went into this and it's like Matt Reeves, the Batman, what could go wrong? And I don't think anything went wrong. And I think the biggest thing I want to get out of the way before we get into more specific things is every single person we were in the theater with like really, really enjoyed it. And like I don't think anybody had any major criticisms. And I think the biggest criticism is, I mean, it's not the Dark Knight trilogy. And like that, I think going in, we didn't want it to be that, but we wanted it to kind of have that same level of, oh shit, this is something special. And this is like a great version of the Batman that we've never seen before. And I think that it is that, just not as much as I would have hoped for. And I think that it is a disservice that this movie came out after those other movies, because had those movies not existed, I think this would easily be a 5 out of 5. But those movies do exist, and this movie only exists because those movies exist. And because of that, I think it's much harder for us to watch this and just be like, just grade it as its own thing, because it's the Batman. It's one of the most popular IP in the world with storylines and characters we've seen a million times. So it's impossible not to compare almost every single element to elements we've seen before. Having said that, I think that this movie does a really great job, again, not amazing job, of taking the elements it is creating and telling a compelling story that I was interested in the entire time. I think that there are Batman moments in this that are better than anything we've seen before. Many of them. I love that the vibe of the trailer was entirely captured in this movie. And I think that that's something that's gotten more rare as the years go on, where you'll watch a trailer and it's trying to sell you on a different movie almost. Like it's way more stylized or whatever. Then you see the movie and you're just like, oh, okay. Like you didn't even use the song in the trailer. You didn't use the theme song, whatever. This movie's not that. This movie uses the theme song every 5 seconds, and it uses trailer music every 5 seconds. And it feels like the trailer's style and aesthetic drawn out into 3 hours. And I say drawn out, and I do mean that. I don't think that this movie needed to be 3 hours. But to contradict myself, I almost think it only works for what it is when it is this long kind of prodding look with all these different characters. There's a lot going on in this movie, but I think that's kind of where it starts to lose its shine. And again, Batman being this dark, gritty thing, like shine is almost a weird way to look at it, but there are shining moments in it, especially with the action. I think is really well done. There's a lot of really stylistic camera choices that I think add to the tenseness that Barrett was talking about. And the entire time you are kind of like, I don't really know what's going to happen. And like something bad could happen at any moment. And there's a lot more horror elements than I kind of expected. Like this does play a little bit more like a serial killer slasher slash
Zodiac
SVU episode. Yeah. And than I ever would have expected.
Feels almost like Seven vibes from it.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those comparisons as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think that that's kind of where I start to get a little more down from the like perfect score down a little bit, where I'm like, I'm watching this and I'm not only thinking like, oh, okay, but did Batman Begins do this better? Did this do this better? Did this do this better? In the Batman side, I'm also like, I feel like Saw did this better. I feel like this movie did that better on those sides. And like that isn't great. And I think it really comes down to my biggest criticism with the movie is I loved the Riddler. I hated his riddles. And like that's really unfortunate, because like I thought that they were just all I wanted was for them to just be clever. And there wasn't a single thing that made me go, oh, and I feel like there should have been, and there definitely should not be ones that make the entire theater erupt in laughter. But there were. So
that's such an interesting conversation to have. Like I'm surprised to hear about like kind of like your comparisons to the other movies is like where like, oh, like maybe Begins did this better, maybe, you know, a movie in a different franchise that did this better. And I was more thinking of like, because it's so like, I think this movie is so clearly inspired by a lot of the comics that I was comparing it directly to some comics. And I think tonally, I think it like really nails what Long Halloween was, right? With the kind of like in a comic book form, the tension and like the kind of fear of like who's next, what's going on, like who is the killer kind of thing. And I think they really hit that tonal vibe really well. There's definitely what Joey was talking about earlier. There's some definite plot things that I think that they also borrow from some comics, and there's a lot that does work for me personally as a fan of like, oh man, like this is something that I know as a comic book fan, and I can't believe they're doing this and they're bringing it into this movie. That's really cool.
0 year.
Yeah,
I thought all the 0 year stuff was really cool.
Yeah, and not even zero, but like even more thinking along the lines of like Long Halloween. There's some like Long Halloween inspired things in here that I didn't expect that they were gonna bring into a movie, and I was like, oh, that's really dope. But then there were some moments that reveal motivations from some certain characters that I was like, that are kind of tied around like kind of the central mystery, right, of some of the motivations behind some people. And when that kind of gets revealed, it's like, oh, well, yeah, that's kind of like there's some. I think there's some elements that like almost Matt Reeves expects his audience to have never read or seen any Batman media ever. Whereas like there's this particular moment, I would say probably like 2/3 of the way through the movie, where it's like, if this is your big reveal, I think you need to respect your audience a little bit more, because I think that's like kind of common knowledge. And to have that be the kind of this big like, oh shit, like everything's about to fall apart, and it's like, all right, like I don't know if I'm completely sold on that, and that kind of like makes the threads of like some of the motivations behind the Riddler and some other people where I'm like, I see where you're going. It just, I wasn't as sold on it personally, but I will agree with you. Like I loved the Riddler, and I did. There are definitely riddles that like kind of make the audience laugh out loud, and like not in a way that I think they intended, but I kind of liked how dumb and goofy they were, because there is, you know, Riddler for the most part in most representations of, you know, in the movies with Jim Carrey and, you know, in some of the comics, he's a goofy, like the core of him is a goofy, dumb character. And that's kind of what I love, that he becomes a main villain in comics like Hush or 0 Year, where it kind of, there's still that core goofiness, but he is a formidable foe. And I think for me, I personally like just how kind of like dumb some of the riddles were, especially with like kind of like how serious he takes himself. And you know, how like there's a little bit of like social media influencer aspects to it as well that I wasn't expecting. With him going on his serial killer tirade. And I kind of liked how goofy it was. I agree. I don't think it was the intention, but it did remind me of like, yeah, Riddler is kind of a dumb character, and I kind of like how dumb this is, but I think that's just kind of a personal thing for me.
No, totally. And I think that if everyone's going to have a different experience with this, I think that I need to say, I can imagine that the majority of people going into this movie are going to want to watch it a second time to really understand how they really feel about it in the long term. Because it definitely, it was a shock to the system of like, it was so much of what I expect, but also enough of like not what I expected, that I'm like, I need to sit with this a little bit longer to see where it really lands in the pantheon of Batman movies or Batman media and all that stuff for me. But with the Riddle stuff, it's like I like goofy Riddler. I just feel like we didn't get that here, and I feel like the riddles weren't goofy enough. And I think that my bigger problem was some of the riddles lacked logic. And I think that they made our protagonists act goofy. Like, without giving it away, there's one key riddle that they go through the entire movie, and they're like, well, maybe it means this, maybe it means this. And like their logic for finding out what that thing is, I'm like, oh my God, like I feel embarrassed for this right now.
It is
weird.
It's frustrating, because I do think this movie, outside of, compared to all of the other Batman movies, like Joey was saying earlier, like, this is the most detective we've gotten, I feel like, out of a Batman movie. And I think it does it for the most part pretty well. But there are moments where it's like, you're not quite the world's greatest detective yet, and it really shows, and you feel that. But at the same time, It's weird, and I'm excited to see. I'm seeing it again on Saturday, with some friends, and I'm excited to kind of like watch it, knowing the plot, knowing everything that's going to happen, and see how moments land with me a second time around, because there's so much, I think, complicated with this movie in some good ways and some bad, and I like that he's trying to be the world's greatest detective, and he's not quite there yet. I like that, like Joey, what you were saying of he's not the typical, smoozy Bruce Wayne who's got that charm, that classic Bruce Wayne charm that we see in a lot of Batman media. Again, tying to Zero Year, he's a much more young, angry Bruce Wayne who doesn't know how to really handle his war.
Bruce Payne.
Yeah, Bruce Payne. And I usually love that, I think in a lot of Batman media, we see kind of they go the opposite route where it's all right, he's old. Now he's an old Batman and he's angry and stuff like that. And I don't love that as much. I love him starting out his journey as Batman with the anger, a young, angry Bruce, where he slowly but surely learns to be the wise detective Bruce Wayne, who knows how to be Batman and to use Batman to help Gotham, who knows how to be Bruce Wayne and use Bruce Wayne to help Gotham as well. And there's some definitely elements here and there that they kind of hint at and kind of maybe build up for the future of this universe that I did enjoy. Yeah.
I want to go back to the puzzles really quick, or the riddles.
Before you do that, Joe, let me tell you about our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Guild Wars 2 End of Dragon, the third expansion for the award-winning and critically acclaimed MMORPG Guild Wars 2, and the culmination of the Elder Dragon saga. There's no shortage of new shenanigans to get up to explore the beautiful Canthan continent, travel, fish with your friends in your own personal skiff, unlock 9 new elite specializations, pilot the Siege Turtle combat mount, and way more. If you're new to Guild Wars 2, don't worry. Their community of over 16 million players are ready to welcome you with open arms. If you're already a Guild Wars 2 commander, it's time to gear up for some new adventures, like that Siege Turtle mount I mentioned earlier. Yeah, it can bear 2 riders, one to handle the turtle, the other to operate the weapon strapped to its shell. That's awesome. What about the personal skiff I mentioned? It's your new home away from home on the waves. Ferry your whole party around to explore, relax, or drop anchor to fish over 200 unique species around Tyria. You can check out the link in the description to get your hands on Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons, available now. Go for it, Joe.
I think my main issues with the riddles, and maybe this is just because I'm comparing it to playing the games where you're Batman and you're also trying to figure stuff out. It didn't seem like anybody in the audience had any shot in figuring out what any of these there was no involvement of anybody, and I think also the characters didn't for a long time are also trying to figure out, so it didn't feel like we were that invested. And I think maybe it's just because I'm comparing to the games that's
something else that I want to compare to the games is some of the action. I remember I think someone was saying last night of in the trailers, right? There's that car chase scene with Penguin where he's trying to get Penguin, and I think someone was saying last night of that might have been, we could have cut that down maybe a little bit. There's a lot of wondering if this could have been a little bit of a shorter movie. I personally like that chasing because it brings me
I
back
love
to,
that chasing.
Yeah, it reminds me of Arkham
Fast and
Knight.
Furious as fuck.
Yeah, it's not a big plot moment, right? He's just trying to catch the Penguin for, I feel like, in the grandiose of what's happening in this entire movie, it's more of a smaller thing he does, but the importance of trying to get him and to talk to him about things. I loved the importance of him kind of having to do this car chase, and probably one of his first big car chases where he has to get a formidable foe, and I loved how big that felt for how kind of small and the plot sense it really was.
That was a moment in the movie, man. That ratcheted it up. That's hey man, I know, I feel like a lot of people are going to say this movie's boring, and I don't think that that's the right word to use. I do think that it's very,
slow.
It's drawn out.
Yeah.
It's really slow and drawn out, but I don't think it's boring. It's engaging the entire time. But I do think that it was the Batmobile sequence that turned it up of like, all right, wake up and pay attention because like there's some energy here. And I do think that there's a moment like way later in the movie that was the first moment I was truly riveted by what was going on in the plot.
Yeah.
Like I think that there's a moment of a shift where prior to it, it kind of just feels like what Joey is alluding to, where not only does the audience not get a chance to answer the riddles, it almost feels like the characters don't. Like they just know the answer as opposed to having to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like almost without fail, they look at the riddle and they make so many leaps to get to the answer that I think is weird. To turn that into a compliment, I think Robert Pattinson did an amazing job of acting without saying much with words, but saying a lot with his face and eyes. Like when he's figuring something out, to us, if you're just listening, it kind of seems like, oh, he figured that out super easy without thinking about it, whatever. You see him thinking.
Yeah, you see the wheels turn.
And I was impressed by that. I think it's a little bit of a cop-out because I wish the riddles were a little more engaging. But like, I do think that the amount of shots we get of him looking around can be memed and can be goofy, but I think they did a really good job with showing us that there's more going on than we're seeing.
Yeah, I with the riddles complaint, I get where that's coming from. I think, again, to harken back to things like Long Halloween or even Zero Year, where, you know, Riddler will throw a riddle at him, and he doesn't have to think too long, really, about it to really solve it. And I think that comes across a little bit more engaging as a comic book fan when you're reading a comic book, because you can, like, pause on a panel and think about it yourself before you know, like, he's probably going to answer it pretty quickly, and kind of think about the riddle yourself before you get that answer. Whereas, like, I don't know if that, like, adapted really well into, like, a movie format where you see him kind of, like, have the quick, like, wheel turn of, like, all right, what is he trying to tell me here? What's going on? What is this message that he's trying to send me? I did personally enjoy it, but I do understand, like, the kind of, when you're setting up in a movie a character like the Riddler, where, you know, his whole thing is riddles and stuff like that, you do want the audience to be a little bit more engaged with, like, being with Batman to figure some of these things out. And yeah, I do think the execution might have been a little weird at times.
It's more that, like, it's not that I want to figure it out. It's that I actually don't want to figure it out. I want them to present a riddle that when I hear the answer, I go, oh, you know what I mean? And I think like, that's that. Yeah. Not like, okay, I guess that does make sense a little bit, but like, it goes back to me thinking about the Joker in Dark Knight, where it's revealed that there's the two boats and there's the bomb situation and the detonators and all that. I'll never, every single time I watch that movie, it feels like the first time when I'm just like, oh, fuck, what are they going to do? I never had that moment in this movie for a second of being like, what are the characters going to do? It was always like, I'm a little worried for people and like there might be violence that causes someone to die, but it was never like, oh, fuck, what's happening? I feel like it's all there. It is what it is. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just kind of would expect more from a Riddler villained Batman movie.
Yeah. To bounce back really quick before I forget to the Penguin scene where he's the car chase stuff. I think that is like a kind of a perfect representation of this movie as a whole, where it's like it's so well done in the moment. And like there's that shot from the trailer where his car flips and he's looking at the Batman. There's that incredible cinematography where it's upside down and the fire behind him.
So sick.
And then it continues. And like this is like the only kind of specific thing I'll try to talk about here, where it's like he walks up to the car and then he awkwardly kind of like does an upside down look. And you're like, we could have cut to the next moment. I don't think we needed to linger here at this specific, like, awkward stare down between the two of them where it doesn't look...
We lingered on that shot long enough for me to think, where are they going to cut to from this? That's not good.
And I feel like there's a lot of similar things throughout the movie. There is a moment, I would say, near the... Like, I was really... For the most part, even with some of like my gripes with the movie, kind of in the middle of the movie with some of the plot stuff of you know, realizing you know, some of the true motivations behind some characters, particularly with like Catwoman and learning like what Riddler is trying to plan and stuff like that. Besides that, I was riding high. And I will say, without giving anything away, there is a scene near the end of this movie that left, I think, a really sour taste in my mouth leaving the movie. And it's this particular scene where I was like, I don't know if I want a sequel. I'm interested in a sequel. I'm interested to see where they go. I don't know if I'm excited to see where they go, you know? And that's unfortunate. I
think a lot of people are going to feel that way.
Yeah, I don't want that from a Batman movie. I want to be like fucking stoked. I want the sequel tomorrow kind of thing. And that's what I felt at the end of Batman Begins. That's what I felt at the end of The Dark Knight. I did not feel that here. And that was kind of unfortunate, where it was just like it played out kind of like this maybe should have been left on the cutting room floor. Like, I think even Greg was like, that felt like a CW level kind of moment. It was like, I think it did not come off as whatever you were trying to go for. It did not come off that same way, which is unfortunate. And
we should talk about it offline, because there's a little bit more that got cut that Matt Reeves was talking about that would make it a little more interesting. I'm kind of with you. I will say that the end of the movie the very, very end of the movie feels a little bit clunky. Like our final shot, like our actual final shot.
Yeah.
I am blown away that was the final shot. Felt just a little bit weird, because there was a couple really epic good ones leading into it. And I do want to say, I actually really, really like where this movie ends. Yeah. I think that might be my favorite part of the entire thing, is like where Gotham is left as a city, where the characters are left.
Yeah,
I'm like
where Bruce's journey has like kind of left off, and like where he's looking to go. They're like, again, with like kind of the more emotional things that they try to do throughout this movie, I don't think hit as much, but there is a moment near the very end, like in the final kind of last couple of minutes, there's a moment with Batman where I was like, damn, that hit. And like knowing where he started and kind of knowing where he has to go now as Batman in this Gotham, I was like, that was a good moment.
And that bit to the end, up until the other things you're talking about, get me extremely excited for a sequel, where I'm like, I want to see what happens in this world. And I think that let's talk about the things we liked about this before we wrap out here, because I know it always gets hard when we like something a lot but want to love it. I feel like we come off a lot more negative than we are.
Yeah,
I think we're all in the same boat. That like, yo, this is definitely a great movie that I want to watch again.
Absolutely.
But I do think that I'm extremely excited with where the sequel's going, and that's because of Gotham City. Like the way that they handled Gotham in this movie, I think is easily the best we've seen in any of the the prior
most
films.
True to form Gotham that we've actually seen in a Batman movie.
And they do cool things with it. Yeah. And also, I love how they treat Gotham, and they've done this lightly here and there with the other movies, but like they treat Gotham like a character in relation to Bruce and Batman. And I think that his relationship with Gotham is very well handled, and probably one of the high points of this movie for me. And yeah, what about you, Joey?
I can't believe we've gotten through this entire review and not talked about Jeffrey Wright, because I really liked him. Maybe I'm in the minority of that one. But I think that the relationship between him and Batman throughout this movie was like one that I wasn't necessarily expecting for them to be so like partnery,
like,
and I
bro-y.
Guess but I just really enjoy him in general, and I thought that he was really good in this. I do have one other side question for Tim. We need a podcast within the podcast. How did you feel about all of the news segments in the movie?
News.
See, I'm okay with these, because these aren't the type of news. Like I want it clear again for everybody. My problem with news things is when main characters learn about a plot point of somewhere they need to go from the news. When it's just news stories that are giving the audience an idea of where the state of the world's at, I'm okay with that. That's believable to me. That makes sense. That's just kind of like world building. I just don't like it when they can't come up with better motivation and a way to explain to the character what he needs to do without having shitty news things be like, well, it looks like the fight's at the hospital. It's like, I guess I'm going to the hospital. Yeah. You know what I mean?
There was just like an egregious amount of like news little segments in this movie. And to the point where like, I don't feel like I don't normally notice it. And I was like, this is kind of a lot.
I see, to me, it worked for me in this movie because that goes to what I'm talking about Gotham City feeling real. Like, I feel like the amount of news coverage and the amount that this movie focuses on kind of political things, and like it is a lot more like politics heavy than most of the other ones we've dealt with, including Dark Knight obviously had Two-Face and Harvey Dent and all that stuff. So like there were like fancy legal words being used, but I feel like this one actually like gets into the relationships between different parts of the city. And I think that the media is a part of that. And I think that the reason they showed it as much as they did is to kind of like cement that there's corruption everywhere in different ways, even if it's not good cop, good news, bad news, fake news type shit. Like
it gives you layers of like, you know, that there are the top of the, but then you see how that's disseminated to like the actual city and the people of Gotham and like just the different ways that it's pervasive.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Barrett, any other things you love that we didn't talk about?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Jeffrey Wright. I did like him. It was I didn't know going in what to expect from this Gordon, because I do really treasure Gordon's relationship to Batman. I did come out of it enjoying it, but it was kind of those like it was kind of that weird like I don't think we've ever really seen Gordon like this before, so it did throw me like off a little bit. I will say also as well, what's the actor's name? I'm blanking on his name. Who plays Alfred? Because we have not talked about Alfred whatsoever. Andy Serkis. I did like him. I personally wanted more from him. I don't think he got enough time to like really come in as an Alfred, which was a little disappointing for me personally. But that does make me
big shoes to fill too. Man.
I know. And I do hope that is something that I am excited for the future of this universe, is being able to see him fill into those shoes as Alfred and see if he actually hits it or not. I don't think he was given as much of a chance as I wanted him to be given here. Some other things, I really adore the relationship between Batman and Catwoman. I think it's the best it's been done in a movie. It really, I think, harkens back to the Long Halloween of kind of just like this. Not even just that one, but like a lot of Batman Catwoman relationships throughout a bunch of the different comics of like kind of the will they won't they, not even a relationship, will they won't they like help each other out in different aspects and stuff like that. I really love the nature of their relationship and how it was presented in this movie. More of just like there's just so many little pieces of inspiration from just so many things that I love. There's even stuff I would say like from Court of Owls, but not Court of Owls. I'm not like spoiling some big fucking reveal, but just like kind of tonally and like some like themes and just some ideas that I think they like really pulled from that I think works really well for me. There was something else that I wanted to bring up. And
I will say there's a lot of things that didn't work for me throughout the movie, character-wise or plot-wise or just dialogue-wise, that by the end of it did work for me, where I was like, okay, they were building to this and I just had to give them the time to get there, and it took 3 hours. But I think that there is I'm going to stop saying anything specific here because it is spoilers, but like there are similarities and differences between the core characters that I think when you understand like, oh, that's the connection, I think it kind of like reframes the entire movie in a way that is interesting to me. We can talk about that after we record though. Any final thoughts, Joe?
I think that this is a movie that I definitely want to see again in order to like process everything. And I think it's a fun movie to talk about, which is like a category that I enjoy, even if it's not 10 out of 10, like nailed everything out of the park. A good movie that has a lot that is divisive enough that you can have these like fun debates, I think adds to the enjoyment of the movie for me personally. So 100%. I'm really excited to keep watching this and keep talking about this.
I'm excited for the in review later this week to really like hear the rest of y'all's thoughts in a kind of spoiler filled context to really like dig into the nitty gritty. The last thing I'll bring up, and this is something you were talking about we brought up near the beginning, rewatched a bunch of Batman movies. I have my ranking on Letterboxd, and just again, because we've been so down, I want to like solidify of just like for video listener or for video watchers, you can see here, but for the audio listeners, this is my top 5. Number 1's The Dark Knight. Number 2's Batman Begins. Number 3's The Dark Knight Rises. 4, Mask of the Phantasm. 5, Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. And I just want to bring those up because I do think it's in the top 5, and I feel like after sleeping on it, after talking about it here, after thinking about it all this morning, I think even going into it, I was wondering if we were going to get something that was either right beneath The Dark Knight or like as good as The Dark Knight. And I think I want to put it below Batman Begins, but above The Dark Knight Rises. Like, I do think it's like in the top 3 of Batman movies. And I think that I want to show that to just like speak to like, this movie does so much so well, and I was engaged with the entire time. And there are just some sequences that I was like, God damn, we have never seen stuff like this in a Batman movie before that I absolutely adore.
Mm-hmm.
It's just unfortunate because I don't want to spoil things, so like we can't get into specifics. But yeah, even with my gripes and stuff, I still really enjoyed this movie, and I can't wait to watch it again this Saturday.
I think what's something that's so interesting where we are with Batman as like a franchise is that we always compare to like such the high highs of the Nolans.
Yeah.
And we are very easy to forget the low lows we've had to go through, especially with like the most recent ones. And so in terms of like the recent stretch of them, I do think that this is like really good.
Yeah.
And I think it's just gonna be really hard to ever reach the highs of Nolan, but
like I do think it's the
we
best.
Can't discredit the fact that it's significantly better than a lot of the other ones.
Yeah, like I do think it's the best Batman movie since The Dark Knight, right? Like I do think like it does have lows, but I don't think those lows are as low as some of the things in Dark Knight Rises. It's got incredible highs. I just don't think that they reach some of the incredible highs that I personally love from Batman Begins and Dark Knight.
Jumping into that real quick, I will say like I'm still kind of thinking about where I'm actually going to rank it. I don't think it's anywhere near Dark Knight or Begins.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about Rises. I think that it's a pros and cons thing. I do think the highs in Rises are way higher than the highs for me in this movie. But I agree that the lows are very problematic in Rises. And I don't think the lows in this are problematic. I just think that they're not as high as I wish they were.
That many? I feel like this is very middle of the line where it doesn't dip or
for me, like the lows, it was just more of like a I don't know if I would have done that this way. There is really only one scene in this movie that I'd like straight up like dislike. Which again in a 3-hour movie is like barely anything. But yeah, I would like say that like there are a good like throughout the movie, like the things here and there that kind of like pile up over time, but nothing where I was like, oh, screw this movie, I'm out of here. Like I was told like in that movie for 3 hours, and again, to give it the highest compliment, it didn't feel like 3 hours to me personally. Like I felt like I blinked and that movie was over.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be a lot of conversation and, dare I say, discourse around this movie the next couple days. Come back here to youtube.com/KindaFunny for our in review later on Friday or Thursday. I don't know when it's happening. I think it's live for Patreon people on Thursday and then public for everyone on Friday. So how do you like that? I love it. Until next time, let us know in the comments below how excited you are for the Batman, or if you've seen it, what you thought about it. Keep it spoiler free though in the comments. Don't be rude. Be cool. Until next time, I love you. Bye.